There was a huge outcry when New South Wales legalised abortion up to birth, but since then it's been crickets. Today on the Dr. Joe Show, we're going to unpack what's really going on in New South Wales. So before we get started, can I just ask that you hit the subscribe button? The more people we have subscribing, the more people we have watching, and the bigger our movement becomes. So on today's show, we're going to be talking about New South Wales. Abortion was the big news story in 2019. If we think back, it's a long time because it's pre-COVID. But remember, Gladys Berejiklian was Premier of New South Wales, and this was the issue that almost had her undone. There was a threatened leadership coup by 3 Liberals in her party who said that if this bill was unamended, they were going to threaten her leadership and call a spill, which would have meant there was a vote. So it was the top news story at the time. And in fact, on the anti-abortion side, on the pro-life side, the people that were really concerned about this bill because it was introducing abortion up to birth and for any reason in New South Wales, there was actually 10,000 people that turned up to Martin Place for a rally. Former Prime Minister Tony Abbott spoke. It was a huge turnout, one of the biggest rallies that we've seen in New South Wales history. By contrast, the other side only really had a couple of hundred that turned out for their rally. And there was a big outpouring of community concern and anxiety about this bill. But when the bill passed, and actually let's take a look at the moment where the bill passed.
The Legislative Council amendments to what was known as the Reproductive Healthcare Reform Bill, now known as the Abortion Law Reform Bill 2019, be agreed to. All those in favour say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. That does conclude the consideration in detail. I will return to the Speaker. Order, please. Order, please.
It's almost sickening to watch, isn't it? The applause and the cheering from the pro-abortion politicians when this bill passes. What they'd literally just legislated was the fact that a child in utero has no human rights protection at any point in pregnancy in New South Wales. Right up until the moment of birth, they can be killed arbitrarily and for any reason. And here were the politicians cheering at that on the floor of the parliament. And, you know, that mirrors scenes across the country in state parliaments when abortion up to birth bills have passed. But it's shocking to look at that back and then think about the legacy of what happened. At the time of that vote, it was a really big deal. It was a really significant moment because there had been so much opposition and it had looked like the bill might not pass. But once it did pass, it was almost like everyone just moved on. All of the 10,000 that turned up to that rally, all of the people, there was hundreds actually that every day turned up to outside the New South Wales Parliament and held placards and called out the MPs and said, you cannot pass this bill. There was so much concern about girls being aborted just because they were girls, sex-selective abortion. There was so much concern about healthy babies being aborted, about women being pressured into abortion. All of that concern, it felt like it just evaporated because in the 5 years since, there's been very little community outpouring, media oversight, independent reporting, any visibility on what's really going on. In fact, we have such little knowledge to this day about what's going on in New South Wales. Unlike in other states, for example, I'll pull up the annual reports that happen in South Australia. There's really comprehensive reporting about the number of abortions, whether it's going up or down, the reasons for late-term abortions, the demographic profiles of women who are getting abortions. We have that data in South Australia, and some of the other states do produce reports. But in New South Wales, there's almost like a cover-up, a whitewash. We know nothing about what's going on. And in fact, the government had a 5-year review to produce, and so the Department of Health produced this review. And it's striking because there's actually no empirical data in this report, no quantitative stats about any of those things that I've just mentioned, any of those indicators. It's just pure anecdote, this report. And there's no actual data. Susan Carter, who's a MP in the Upper House, a Liberal MP, she actually asked a question on notice to the Minister for Health about this. And she asked the Minister for Health how many late-term abortions have happened since the bill was passed in 2019. She said, what were the reasons for them? She said, what about the babies who survived their abortion? What kind of care are they now receiving? How long do they live for? Do they need resuscitation? And so she asked these very specific questions that you can see on the screen. And let's look at the very scant answer she receives back from the Minister for Health. The answer Susan Carter received back is that between October 2019 and September 2022, there's been 154 babies killed through a late-term abortion in New South Wales. So that amounts to about 3 babies a week in the first 2 years of the abortion up to birth laws in New South Wales. We haven't got any more recent data. The Minister for Health refuses to give any reason for why these late-term abortions are happening. So we know in South Australia, 80% of late-term abortions kill healthy babies. Nearly 1 in 2 in Victoria kill healthy babies. But none of that data is released in New South Wales. He also doesn't give any information on the babies who survive their abortion, what care is being given to them. There's an obligation under the New South Wales Act that babies who survive their abortion are treated no differently to any other baby born prematurely in the state. But no data is given. And it says, the online notification system doesn't collect any details of the outcome of termination of a pregnancy or for the reason. So, it's really concerning, I think, to just have such little data collected on a area of the practice of so-called healthcare in New South Wales, where a little baby can be killed right up until birth for any reason, and there's no visibility on that. But something we do know is even though the abortion activists have been pushing abortion up to birth and they got what they wanted, they got their Christmas list when that bill passed, they are still fighting for something else. And I've been talking about this a lot on the channel. The second episode was about the fake abortion access crisis that the left is manufacturing. Well, we know that in New South Wales, activists have been really concerned that there hasn't been enough abortion, that there aren't enough hospitals performing surgical abortions, and that, this needs to be happening more and expanded. And so we've seen that campaign emerge. And so that tells us something, that things aren't quite going to plan for the big abortion industry in New South Wales because they want more. In fact, this Sydney Morning Herald article says that only 2 hospitals, the John Hunter Hospital in Newcastle and the Wagga Wagga Base Hospital in Murrumbidgee, are the only 2 hospitals that actually provide elective surgical abortions. So that means you can just walk in and get your baby's body either vacuumed up by a powerful suction abortion or ripped apart through dismemberment, through medical forceps. Only 2 hospitals in the whole of New South Wales perform surgical abortions. And I've said, again and again, that's just because these doctors don't actually want to do this kind of brutal work. So for the abortion industry, they've been talking about this crisis, and I've talked as well about how they work with academics to manufacture this crisis. And this article in the Journal of Rural and Regional Studies looked at Western Sydney, and it looked at the fact that in Western Sydney, surgical abortion isn't available. You have to go to a private clinic. And they make this point. They say, despite being fully decriminalised in all states and territories, abortion remains a grey and stigmatised area of health practice outside the purview of mainstream medicine. And so it should be stigmatised because it kills a human being. But these pro-abortion academics, along with the pro-abortion media and the SMH and the Guardian and the ABC, they don't think it should be stigmatised. They want all of us to have a positive view of abortion. So they've said Australia's public health system does not routinely fund, provide or monitor abortion. So these guys want abortion to be free and paid for by us. And then it says most procedural surgical abortion services are delivered by a small number of independent providers at considerable out-of-pocket cost to the consumer. So what that means in non-academic jargon is that the only way you can get your baby's body brutally ripped apart or suctioned out is if you pay for it at a private clinic, because at public hospitals, whether they're Catholic or secular public hospitals, there just aren't doctors wanting to do this work. And then this article goes on to say, whilst all conscientious objectors are legally obliged to refer to other available services, the absence of clear referral pathways or proximate options for rural populations means this obligation can easily remain unfulfilled. So these pro-abortion academics also have in their sights freedom of conscience, and they don't want people to have to refer for abortion. So all of this to say that abortion up to birth was legalised in New South Wales in 2019, but we're now at a point where they haven't got what they wanted because there's too many pesky doctors saying we don't want to do this. There's too many hospitals who are refusing to do surgical abortions. And so now they need to pull their next move. To try and address this unexpected problem that we don't have abortion in every hospital paid for by us and performed by every doctor, the abortion industry has worked with Amanda Cohn, Greens MP, to get a bill into the Parliament. And I've been talking about one aspect of the bill already, but I want to talk in this video about 3 other aspects that are really important. Quick recap. The biggest issue I see with this bill is the fact that it has the potential to force the closure of Catholic hospitals because they won't perform abortions, because in the bill in Schedule 1 it says that the Minister for Health can make directions which hospitals must comply with. So it sets a terrifying precedent for the interference with institutional conscientious objection, the rights of these hospitals to be able to not perform a procedure that is killing a human being because it goes against their conscience, their very ethos. But there are three other big problems with this bill that I haven't even had time to talk about because I've been so focused on the first problem, and I wanted to discuss them with you today. So the second major problem with this bill is that it forces midwives and nurses to become killers. So midwives and nurses, and typically midwives in particular, they've gone into midwifery because they love babies, because they want to birth babies. And yet in this bill, what Amanda Cohn seeks to do is to allow midwives and nurses to prescribe RU486. Now, RU486 is the abortion pill. So this is a book that pro-abortion scholars have written, and I do try to use pro-abortion sources because I think then no one can accuse me of bias that I'm just picking and choosing. This is Renata Klein, Janice Redmond and Lynette Dumble, and they wrote this book on RU486. They're very concerned about the power of the pharmaceutical industry in pushing these pills and the ability to make billions of dollars of profits. And in this book, they trace the really concerning side effects with these pills, the health risks for women, but they also look at how the approval processes for these pills were fast-tracked, and the studies, there was huge walk-away rate where women weren't responding, and so they lost participants in the studies. And so they look at how the evidence base for approving these pills was really shaky, how there was a lot of pressure on government and a lot of money behind pushing these pills as being safe and effective. And the big tagline is they're safer than Tylenol or Panadol. But in this book, they trace how there's actually really significant risks for women. Women can die from taking these pills. Women need to be in close access to emergency departments. They can hemorrhage. They might need a blood transfusion. There's all sorts of things that can happen. And yet, in Amanda Cohn's bill, she relies on this report that I referred to earlier, the New South Wales Health Report. And this report by New South Wales Health is just totally based on anecdote. It doesn't have any of the data about the risks for these abortion pills. And in fact, the way they did the methodology in this report is they just literally sent out a survey to abortion stakeholders. So there was, I think, 35 responses. 33 out of the 35 are from people that perform abortions, have no problem with abortions. And so in the section on, should midwives and nurses be allowed to prescribe abortion drugs, RU486, the report just says, yes, absolutely. Overwhelmingly people were supportive of this. And of course they would be. They get money out of this. They're involved in this. This is their business. It's what they do for a day job. So of course, if you ask people, if I ask my toddler, do you want mummy to have a lock on the lolly box or in the cupboard, or do you want to be able to have free access? They're going to be saying, yeah, we want free access to lollies. Like, that's what toddlers do. If you ask the abortion industry, do you want nurses and midwives to be able to give out abortion pills? They're going to say yes, because it's cheaper for them. For Marie Stopes, they can save so much money if they don't have to get a doctor to prescribe these pills, because a doctor's salary is so much higher than a nurse and a midwife. And so, of course, when the New South Wales government asks the abortion industry, do you want nurses and midwives to give out abortion pills, they're going to say yes. But what's notable in this report is that there's no actual data on the complication rate. So even if we just pull up the SA Health report, so every year SA Health produces data on abortions in South Australia, and what we can see is out of the different methods of abortion, the mifepristone and misoprostol regime, so that means RU486, that's another name for the abortion pill regime, you take 2 pills, you can see that it was the most popular method of abortion in South Australia, and that is because it's cheaper and easier to get. So 2,992 women killed their babies through taking pills. They took pills and they went home, and then they delivered their baby into the toilet basin, often coming confronted face-to-face with their baby. The complication rate for abortion drugs in South Australia is 6.6%, and compared with a 0.4% complication rate for a suction abortion, or a 0.2% complication rate for a D&E abortion. So overwhelmingly, the riskiest method of abortion for women is a medical termination or a chemical termination, or RU486 or mifepristone and misoprostol. Those are all the same words to describe the same thing, which is abortion pills being taken by women in their home, prescribed for at the moment by GPs. But Amanda Cohn and this dodgy report by New South Wales Health, they want midwives and nurses to be able to do it. And that's really dangerous because nurses and midwives aren't trained to assess the safety risks in the same ways as GPs. They also, one of the reasons they want to do this is so that nurse practitioners in rural and regional Australia can prescribe these abortion pills. And, the problem with that is the safety advice suggests that you need to be within 2 hours of an emergency department, and you need to have done an ultrasound beforehand to make sure that your pregnancy is not ectopic. Because if you take these pills and you've got an ectopic pregnancy, these pills will try and end your pregnancy. So what will happen is you've got a baby that's growing in your fallopian tubes. That's what an ectopic pregnancy is. The first pill is seeking to starve that baby to death by removing the nutrient supply. The second pill is seeking to expel that baby. But that's extremely dangerous for a woman in ectopic pregnancy. So actually, there's a lot of concerns about the safety of these pills, and there has to be precautions around how you prescribe them. But for the abortion industry, and Amanda Cohn from the Greens, she just wants to see these in the hands of nurses and midwives and women everywhere without any of these safeguards. Problem number 3 in the bill is the effect on individual conscientious objection. So this is the fact that you might have people working in any hospital in New South Wales, not just a Catholic hospital or a faith-based institution. You just might be working in any hospital, but you may feel that you don't want to do abortion because it kills a human being. You may not want to do abortion because you're religious. There'll be a whole lot of reasons why people don't want to do abortion. You might not want to do abortion because of the data that says women who get abortions are largely coerced into it by their socioeconomic circumstances or a violent partner. So that might be a reason you don't want to do abortion, because you're pro-women. And, it doesn't really matter for Amanda Cohn from the Greens and the abortion industry. They want to force you to do it. So in the bill, in Schedule 1, Section 9, what it says is that if you have a conscientious objection to abortion, you have to transfer that person's care immediately to somebody else who can perform that abortion. And in fact, you have to have a reasonable belief that that other person will actually perform the abortion. And so this is going far beyond what we have already had in the abortion bill in New South Wales, which, again, I have problems with. I've written an article in the Cambridge Journal of Law and Religion with a colleague, Professor Suzanne Lemire, and we trace the fact that just referring for abortion, that might not seem like much to ask of someone, but that act of referral is the first substantive step in the process of getting the abortion. And now what Amanda Cohn wants to do is make sure that you can't just give a list to someone of, okay, this is where you can get an abortion in New South Wales. She wants you to actually do the ring around so that you've got a reasonable belief that you are transferring this patient to somebody else who can kill their baby. And if you are someone with a conscientious objection to abortion, this is not just a trifling matter. It's not just that, you don't like the T-shirt colour that the person is wearing. This is that you don't want that person to do a procedure which involves that baby being killed directly, deliberately and intentionally, and you don't want to have any part of that. And so to ask, someone with a conscientious objection to have to, ring around and find out who can do it, then to write a referral and give it to that person, you're the first step in the process. For a doctor who really believes that abortion is killing innocent human beings in utero, it's akin to asking them to call around to find a hitman to, for someone who wants to kill their husband because, he's cheating on her. Like it's like that. It's that bad. And for Amanda Cohn, this makes sense because she's all the way in. She's an abortionist. She can't open the door to this perspective, even the slightest crack, because that would mean that she's wrong, that what she's been doing her whole life is akin to mass murder. And so for her, she has to, introduce bills like this that force other people, other reasonable, normal people to do abortions, because otherwise it throws up everything that she's ever done, her very reason for existing. Okay, the fourth big problem with the bill, and this should be a massive red flag to you if you are pro-choice and you're watching this channel, and it should be a red flag to all of us, is that she actually wants to remove the data reporting requirement. So there's a very measly data reporting requirement in New South Wales that after 28 days or within 28 days, you have to give some information about the abortion that you've just carried out. And Amanda Cohn reckons this is a barrier to abortion access. So she actually just wants to remove that in the bill. And it's so funny how they cherry pick when they want to do something like this. Because remember how she was so into this report because it said, nurses and midwives should have to perform abortions by giving out RU486. Also in that report, the abortion industry is quoted as saying, we don't think the data reporting requirement is good, it's causing too much red tape, it's slowing things down. But ultimately, the report's authors make recommendation 3, which says the Ministry for Health should review the data notification requirements and consider how this could be improved to ensure the data is consistently reported and of sufficient quality. But, Amanda Cohen has conveniently pushed that recommendation to the side when she says in her bill, let's just get rid of data reporting altogether and make it optional. So all of this together, these 4 major problems with this bill, means it has to be stopped. We have had total radio silence about abortion up to birth in New South Wales since 2019. There's been such little opposition. And, I know there's been the Day of the Unborn Child, there's been a march here and there every year, but it's just not enough. When there's babies being slaughtered up until birth for any reason in New South Wales, and everybody cared about it in 2019, we should be caring about it today. And particularly at this moment when this bill is being introduced, which takes it to a whole nother level of just monstrosity and barbarism, we have to speak up. The person who has the power to stop Cohen's bill going forward is Premier Chris Minns. And Premier Chris Minns does love to talk a big game in terms of being a sort of not a radical lefty. He's sort of positioned himself as a bit of a social conservative in the Labor Party, in some way. And he talks about his Catholic faith. Okay, so he is the person that has the power to make sure this bill lapses, that it never gets time to be voted on or debated in the Parliament. And that's what we need Minns to do. So I've got an open letter to Chris Minns that I need you guys to sign. If we look at this picture of what happened in 2019, it was a coalition of people. So Alex Hyde, the Independent, was the one pushing this pro-abortion up to birth bill. But then you had Jenny Long from the Greens, and look who's next to them up front, Joe Halen from Labor, a very prominent person within Labor who's very close to Minns. So we know that there's going to be very prominent pro-abortion Emily's listers in the Labor Party who are whispering into Chris Minns' ears saying, let's just get this bill through. The only way we stop it is if we make noise now. So I do need you to sign this open letter and to get everybody to sign it, to call Chris Minns' office and to really make it very clear to Chris Minns that we expect him to stop this radical bill that has no precedent anywhere else in the world, that it just not be passed, that it not be looked at, that it just this be the last we ever hear of it. So thank you for watching today, and please make sure you call Chris Minns, sign the open letter and get involved.